welcome everyone to Immigration Talk Show. I'm your host Sam, and today we are back again with another very exciting and very lively topic. So, before moving ahead, let me read out this very important disclaimer. By watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. So, use of information is at your own risk. All right, friends, after this very important disclaimer, once again, welcome back everyone to Immigration Talk Show. And we are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and on X as well. So let us know from which platform you guys have joined us and post your questions, post your queries, because today the topic is very important. And that's about traveling to the US in 2025, how to stay safe under new executive orders. So we all know that what's going on and what's happening in the US is very chaotic, and people are very concerned, especially not only the travelers or the tourists, but everyone, workers, students, or even the family visitors as well. So, in today's session, we are going to explore each and everything like what documents you have to carry, what are the steps you have to follow, what tips and tricks are important for students, for travelers, for everyone, those who are trying to visit US in this upcoming year. So, friends, without any further ado, let me welcome today's very special guest and very honorable guest, Attorney Kimberley Best Robidoux. So, Kimberly, please come to the stage and let us know how you're doing. And I'm really excited for this session. So, thank you so much for being here. And we are really grateful that you are here with Immigration Talk Show.
Yeah, hi Sam. It's great to see you again, and I'm excited to be here as well to help answer some questions and provide some information. Because as you said, it is a little maybe very chaotic here in the U.S. right now. A lot of different things going on in addition to immigration.
So, Kimberly, can you please let us know, like, what is actually the situation going on, what people are reacting, and how is everything going on, matlab, just like that way? Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I think maybe people have heard around the world is about the deportation effort here in the United States. So our Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency has been given a quota to meet with respect to arrests, and that is 1,200, about 1,200 or so, which translates it into 75 individual arrests for each field office at any given time. So that's pretty high. What ICE has been doing is, especially in some of the communities people may have heard in Chicago, New Jersey, there's been some here in San Diego as well, is going after, meaning going to people's homes or their workplaces, looking for specific individuals that
Mhm.
have either criminal background issues or they are in the system, the immigration system to some extent, because of having been, having had entered the United States without authorization and violated their status. So those are some of the, I guess, low-hanging fruit that we're seeing right now. Unfortunately, some individuals who do have valid status are
Mhm.
being what we call collateral damage. So they have been affected by this action as well. What typically happens is if ICE is looking for individual A and an individual B is in the same area or work site or complex, if the agents ask for documents, they might then bring that individual in for detention. So that has happened to some individuals who do have some type of legal status in the United States, which is typically related to temporary protected status or DACA. So those are
Mhm.
some actions that are happening here in the US. And we're expecting some additional worksite actions to include ICE asking employers for various documentation so that they can determine if there are any undocumented workers that could be detained. And then
Mhm.
we expect in the near future at some point for there to be an increase in the what we call the I-9 audits, and that's the employment eligibility verification form. And that is the form that all employers have to complete for every employee. And typically ICE has done audits of those forms to ensure that the individuals do have valid work authorization to work in the US. And we do expect increased audits in the coming months. Right
Mhm.
now, we're more focused on those individuals who have criminal violations or are, are undocumented.
All right, all right. So, Kimberly, is it that, as you already said, that the target for the ICE rates are 1200 to 1500, and that's we all know about it. So, why is it that also the legal people are also getting affected? Because it's mostly about the illegal ones, right? But why is it that legal one are also being targeted, and why they are also being questioned? I mean, what's your call on that?
Yeah, so for one of the things that we understand is that some individuals who do have a valid status in the United States might not be the direct target of these actions. And I typically we would refer to a raid as a situation where ICE has investigated, for instance, a particular company, and then they go in and they serve a warrant and they review the workforce, round up essentially the individuals who don't have valid authorization, and then may seize documents from the company. So these are more targeted actions and not what we typically call or refer to as raids because of how they're not going after the company and the individuals within the company, but maybe one particular or two particular people. So what has been happening for those who do have a valid status is they may be next to an individual who is being targeted. So ICE will ask them for their documents. It's important to know that individuals do not have to respond to an officer or an agent asking for their immigration status unless there is a judicial warrant that forces that disclosure. And again, individuals who have either a valid immigration status in the US or who are undocumented, we are recommending that they do seek legal counsel in order to understand what their rights are. The
Mhm.
ACLU has a lot of know your rights information that's out there that we recommend individuals review, even if they are legally in the US. So one of the reasons that those individuals are being caught up in some of these actions is because they're, like I said, they're collateral damage, unfortunately. So they're not necessarily being targeted, but they're there in that direct vicinity, or they're in that that area where ICE is conducting their and their arrests. And because of this quota, it's easier to just pull in as many people as possible in order to meet the quotas. So that's one of the reasons that we're seeing individuals with status being affected by this process. And so those who are in the U.S. in a valid non-immigrant status, they should make sure to carry their documentation to prove their status at all times, as well as people who are permanent residents, and even in some instances there are U.S. citizens that are starting to carry their documentation because they don't look like what ICE thinks as somebody who is not undocumented. So in other words, individuals who are not white tend to be questioned more often than ICE, unfortunately. Questioned by ICE, unfortunately, because of, to a certain extent, this profiling.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderfully explained, Kimberly, and I would say thank you so much. And friends, we are really going to discuss each and everything like what are the rights, what are the legal things that you have to follow so that you can stay safe in this year if you're planning to travel to the US. We'll go each and everything step by step. You also make sure from your end that you ask questions, you put up your queries on the comment section because until and unless you're not going to ask, you're not going to raise questions, I think it will be very difficult for you all to understand and to plan out everything. So question each and everything. Make sure this session to be more conversational and lively. And we are here for an hour. So thank you so much everyone for joining us. And also, Kimberly, I would like to directly jump into my very first question. That what are the most important changes in the new executive orders that travelers to the US need to know for 2025?
Yeah, so the executive orders have essentially stated that there's going to be additional vetting of individuals entering the United States, both at our port of entry as well as through the visa application process. So that is one of the biggest things. The executive orders are talking about securing our borders. So there are additional National Guards that are posted at the southern borders. And that is to assist in case there are actions of individuals trying to enter the United States without authorization. But the Customs and Border Protection officers are also, to a certain extent, asking additional questions about an individual's purpose for entering the US and ensuring that they have the proper documentation. Now, with individuals that are applying for visas at U.S. consular posts abroad, the executive order that is saying more extreme vetting will likely end up with more administrative processing of certain applications. But at this point in time, we haven't really seen a negative impact on the consular visa application process, which is a
Mhm.
good thing. But we'll continue to keep a watch on that. We do know that Customs and Border Protection has asked additional information of individuals coming into the US, especially those who have an advanced parole document. There's a little bit of confusion at some of the ports of entry about the parole documents. So some individuals have been placed in secondary for a couple of hours while the officers review to make sure that that advanced parole document is valid. So those are some of the things that we're seeing with these executive orders that call for more secure borders, and then also the internal enforcement of immigration laws. So that's where we're seeing the deportation impact as well.
That's right. Okay, so I think let's move ahead with our next question. Kimberly, as you explained about what are the changes, and I would also like to know that how will the new executive orders in 2025 is going to affect the H1B applicants who are planning to travel and also the work status in the US? Yeah.
Yeah, so for H1B individuals, again, until we see that there's a backlog with the visa applications at the U.S. consular posts abroad, which might in fact happen if we lose the individuals who are part of the civil service that process the visa applications. That could result in longer wait times to get a visa appointment. We're also expecting that the government might either eliminate or reduce the visa, not the visa, the waiver of the visa interview at the consular post, right? So a lot of individuals have been able to schedule their visa appointment, provide their documentations in a Dropbox, and never actually have to go in for a meeting with a consular officer. So that might be removed, but yet that has not happened. But those are some things to expect. And if that happens, again, that would increase the wait time to get a visa appointment. So that could have a negative impact on individuals who are applying for H1B visa stamps at consular posts abroad. So that would mean if traveling back home for family issues or reasons, or going on vacation outside of the United States, or even for business travel, it might mean planning that further in advance to ensure
Mhm.
that a visa application appointment is obtained while they're going to be abroad. And then on the back end, potentially having longer wait times if it's going to take the consular post longer time to process the visa applications, either because of increased, not reduced, but increased vetting and background checks. So those are some things to keep an eye on. We are also, based on one of the executive orders, waiting to hear about the current administration's
Yeah.
implementation of any travel bans, right? So there
Mhm.
has been a lot of talk about travel bans. Based on information that's been provided by the administration, we would expect to hear something in the next 45 days or so. And that would provide us with additional information about, is that banning certain countries, individuals who are nationals of certain countries? Would it impact particular visa applications or statuses? And then with H1B applications in the United States, we do have an action by our Congress that is trying to rescind the H1B Modernization Act that the Biden administration put into place, which clarifies what is considered a specialty occupation. It opened up the CAP exempt organization eligibility a little bit, and it provided deference to prior applications and petitions that were adjudicated for certain individuals, so that a U.S. officer, if they saw, oh, this person has had an H-1B visa, now they're filing an extension, let's give deference to the prior approval. So that Modernization Act put that deference into the regulation. And so if they were to rescind that, then we might have a situation in from Trump 1.0 where officers, when they're reviewing an H-1B petition, would review it as if it's the first time that the individual has held H-1B status and place a higher level of scrutiny on it. So those are some things that we're concerned with. And
Mhm.
then some of your, your viewers, and you may have heard that there's also been some talk about putting into place regulations that the Trump administration tried to do the first time, which would make it a requirement to essentially pay higher level wages to H-1B workers, which actually would be way above what U.S. workers are paid right now. So it's using the prevailing wage survey to say, okay, everybody needs to be a level 4, and no one in H-1B status can be a level 1, 2, or 3. So those are some things that we're looking at, as well as we know, and we've seen a little bit, right? I mean, it's only been a few weeks, but we've already seen some increases in requests for evidence, which again would just create a little bit more stress, anxiety. It delays the process. And so that's what we're keeping an eye out to understand what the patterns are with respect to any kind of request for evidence.
That's right. But also, Kimberly, I would like to know it from you that why the H1B applicants are being targeted in this new Trump, I would say Trump's administration, because we all know that H1B workers have been contributing a lot to the US economy. So why is it that they have to face these challenges, or why is it that it's going to be difficult for the H1B applicants this year?
Sam, I would have to say we don't know 100% why, right? There's for some reason there's been this disdain for the H-1B program by Republican congressional members and some senators for a significant period of time. The
Mhm.
H-1B program has been attacked many, many times as saying that it takes away jobs from U.S. workers. There have been a lot of reports that have reviewed this and have shown that H-1B workers actually contribute significantly to our workforce. There are things in place that prohibit paying H-1B workers less than what you would pay a U.S. worker. Now, there might be some organizations that find a loophole, not even a loophole, but they get around that by classifying someone as a level 1 when they're really a level 4 in terms of the prevailing wage. So there have been some abuses by some organizations, but for the most part, U.S. employers are employing H-1B workers when they can't find a good U.S. worker, right? And a U.S. worker is a permanent resident, a U.S. citizen, an asylee, or a refugee.
Yeah.
So there's been that tension for many, many years. Unfortunately, some of the congressional representatives don't really want to understand and see the documentation that shows the significant value that H-1B workers bring to the United States workforce. H-1B workers are also entrepreneurs, right? We've seen that as well. So
Mhm.
those are some of the things that that is just, in a way, it's common sense based
Yeah.
on the reporting that has been done to find out what has been going on with the H-1B program. And then, we have the tech industry here that are significant supporters of the H-1B program. So right
Mhm.
now, they're kind of at odds with the MAGA base, right? So you have the MAGA base that for some reason,
Mhm.
and I don't understand it completely, because I don't think like that. I don't have a mentality where all H-1B workers are bad. Like, that is not the case. All H-1B employers are not bad, right? There are some bad apples, as with any kind of program, but the vast majority of H-1B employers and H-1B workers are really incredible, and they provide a lot to our businesses here in the U.S. So there has been that tension for a really long time. It's just kind of, with what's going on here politically, it's kind of brought that to a head. But there are those two factions that
Mhm.
are fighting it out right now with respect to what do we
Yeah.
do with the H-1B program.
Absolutely. I think that's very well said, Kimberly. You said a lot of things about H1B workers. And of course, they are getting less payment as compared to the American workers. And also, there's a being like tech industry is so many H1B workers are also there. So we have been seeing that H1B workers are a lot in the US businesses and US companies, and it's really hard to accept that they may find some difficulty in this year so that they can have jobs, and there are a lot of things that going on with the H1B workers. But I think you said that you are not in favor of this, and you said that they are incredibly good in their work. So I think that's what we got the idea from you. Like, how do you think about it? And we really want to know about it. Okay, so now my main question to you is, Kimberly, that as viewers are really concerned about traveling in the US, so what steps should they take to ensure that they comply with the new immigration regulations?
So for travelers, it's really important if someone is in the United States and is going abroad and then will be returning to the US, every time that someone seeks admission at the port of entry, it's at the CBP officer's discretion, right? So it's really important that if someone is in the US, they leave and they come back, or if someone is coming into the United States for the first time from abroad, it's incredibly important to make sure to have the correct documentation in hand. And that will depend upon the reason for the visit. But
Right.
every individual has to have a valid passport, and that passport should be valid for at least 6 months beyond the anticipated length of stay in the United States,
Mhm.
because CBP officers can limit admission into the United States until the expiration of the passport. So the way that that would play out is if an H1B worker or an L1B worker has a passport that is valid until January 1st, 2026, but their approval notice is valid until July of 2026 into the United States until their passport expires on January 1st of 2026. So make sure to have the passport valid beyond the period of requested stay. Make sure to have an appropriate visa stamp in your passport if you are a citizen of a country that requires a visa stamp. Pretty much the only country that is exempt is Canada, and they
Mhm.
have visa requirements for a few visa categories, but for the most part, only Canadians are visa exempt. So an individual will have to have that H1B visa stamp for their H1B classification, their L1 classification, TN, F1, whatever is their status that they're seeking admission. And then documentation to support that, right? So someone who has H1B classification, or in some circumstances, the L1 classification, they would have a form I-797 notice of approval, and they want to make sure that they carry that with them. And if they carry that with them, and they also want to present it to CBP officer. My recommendation is don't wait for CBP officer to ask for it, just include it with the passport, right? So that it's crystal clear that someone is seeking admission based on that petition approval notice. And then for individuals that are students in F1 status, they need to make sure that they have their appropriate Form I-20 that has been endorsed by the DSO for travel. And if they hold OPT or STEM OPT, we also recommend that they carry their EAD cards with them. And it also is not a bad idea to have an employment verification letter that comes from the employer stating that the individual is in fact employed and returning to the U.S. to continue to work with this entity, or to start work with the entity. And that letter does not have to be presented automatically to CBP, but it's something to have in your pocket, so to speak, in case CBP asks for proof of work authorization in the U.S. Yeah, via the employer. And then, you
Mhm.
know, depending on the individual's particular status, there might be additional documentation that is necessary in order to prove their valid entry into the U.S. But those are the key things, Sam, is the passport with a visa stamp and an approval notice.
Absolutely. I think that's really good of you that you explain everything about the H1B applicants, what are the things necessary for them, for the L1 visa applicants, for the students as well. Also, Kimberly, I would like to know it from you, like when they go to the CBP officers. So, can you give us some examples, like what questions do they ask from the applicants?
Yeah, sometimes the officers will ask, what status are you requesting admission in? probably not in that exact language, but how are you coming into the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
What is your status? Let me see your passport. Where do you work?
Okay.
Who is your employer?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what period? When do you want to? Geez, it's escaping me right now. But what I want to say is the officer might ask, when is your H1B valid until? Right. That's another question that they could ask.
Mm-hmm.
They could also ask just a couple of questions to understand if the person does in fact work for the company, because the CBP officers have so many people that they are reviewing at an airport, right? When people come in on the plane, they have very, very limited time. So
Yeah.
typically the questions are really, really fast. Like, what's the purpose of your visit to the US? I'm in H1B status, right? So you want to make sure that it's crystal clear. Or I'm in H4 status. My spouse has H1B. So it's typically, what is the purpose of your visit to the United States?
Mm-hmm.
Only answer the questions that are asked, right? There's no reason to provide additional information. And one exception that I always want to tell people, because individuals in H1B status or L1 status can use an H1B visa stamp from company A, even if they're with company B, it's important that in that circumstance, the individual makes it clear that they are coming to the US to work for company B, and here's the approval notice. Because a lot of times officers might just enter the information based on the visa stamp. But if your employer is your new employer, and it might even be an employer you've been with for over a year, but if the employer on your approval notice is not the same employer where you obtained your visa stamp, make it crystal clear that you are entering based on that H1B approval notice or L1 for the
Mm-hmm.
employer for that period of time. So that's where I say the one exception where you would give a little bit more information to the CBP officer at the port of entry. Otherwise, just answer the questions that are asked. And typically, individuals are not placed into secondary for additional questioning unless there's something that an officer thinks this doesn't pass the smell test, right? There's just something odd here. So those are some things to definitely consider before entering the U.S. And the other thing is, I guess I don't ever feel like I have to say this, but I do, and I will, is just be really polite to the officers, even if they're mean and not very nice. They could be having a really bad day. Don't contribute to that, right? It's always to be respectful. And that's where I see some issues that happen, is where an officer may not be the most pleasant person, but that results in the individual not being very nice or being rude as well, and that can result in bad things happening. So as much as it might be difficult, always be nice, always be respectful. And if there's any questions, with respect to if someone has a question, they can ask for a supervisor if there is a problem that's happening with the CBP officer.
I think the last step was really important because most of the time, we forget the last one. But I think that was really great. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for making us aware about these very, I would say, important tips, and very, I would say, the tips that we can never exclude from our list. And the last one was also very great, to be respectful, because we should understand how frustrated they might be by inquiring each and every applicant. So it's really tough. But I think now we at least got to know, what are the steps or what are the tips that viewers can be, can check out to travel to the US. And also, Kimberly, with this, I would like to know it from you. Like, how have the executive orders affected the rules for students who are entering the US?
So it's just as with H1B individuals, it's pretty similar, right? Additional vetting, potentially asking additional questions of an F1 student at the port of entry, ensuring that the student has their appropriate documentation in hand, right? Their passport, their visa stamp, the endorsed I-20, and if they have OPT or STEM OPT, then that EAD card. So that's really important. One of the other things to consider is there's an executive order that was signed. I think it may have been last week. I know the weeks are blending together right now with all the executive orders that are being issued. But there's one that is directed against anti-Semitism. and there were some students who had protested with respect to the war in Israel and Gaza that were pro-Palestinian. And that executive order essentially says that if individuals are doing something that is perceived or is in fact anti-Semitic, that they can be arrested. So there have been actions and talk about the administration asking for information from universities and colleges about individuals who may have participated in certain protests. So that's
Mhm.
something for students to be aware of. And then the other thing, and this isn't just students, but it kind of reminds me right now when I'm talking about the anti-Semitic or the executive order on anti-Semitism,
Mhm.
that there's a Laken Riley law that was just
Yeah.
signed by President Trump, which
Mhm.
essentially says that if anybody is arrested, not convicted, but arrested, they can be detained and deported. So that is something to be really careful about. I know individuals don't come to the United States with plans to violate the laws in the United States, and individuals in F1 status and non-immigrant status, that's typically not their main reason to be in the U.S.
Mhm.
But sometimes things happen. Something as what a lot of people think is, well, it is. It's called a petty theft, which is stealing something from a grocery store. Um,
Yeah.
people and I'm people just need to be aware of this new law that makes it really difficult for individuals in non-immigrant status, because they have that situation where they could be arrested and detained for a violation before they're even convicted of the crime.
All right. Also, Kimberly, are there any additional documents that maybe for students that they need to be, I mean, they need to have during their traveling?
I mean, in addition to, so they always need to have their Form I-20 that's endorsed by the DSO for their travel,
Mm-hmm.
their OPT and their STEM OPT EAD card, if they've already graduated and are working based on those. If a student might be engaged in curricular practical training, that would be noted on their I-20, and they might want to have a letter from their employer confirming that they are, returning to work. Same thing with individuals who have already graduated from their programs and have OPT or STEM OPT. A letter from the employer confirming their work in the United States can be presented to the officer if the officer asks for proof that they are, in fact,
Mm-hmm.
abiding by their work authorization with respect to the OPT or STEM OPT.
All right. Okay. Also, Kimberly, do you think that the students they have a better chance in this year to travel to the US as compared to the H1B workers? And what's your call on that?
I mean, the F1 students have in the past, in many instances, have been given priority when it comes to visa application processing so that they can ensure that they're at the school when classes start. So there has been some, I wouldn't say preferential treatment, but there has been some consideration of individuals who are in F1 or M or J1 status that are starting a program.
Mm-hmm.
So the consular posts have put those visa applications first, specifically in the summertime, right? So people can get into the US for their programs. So that is definitely something that has been more preferential for individuals in F1 status compared to H1B status. So
Mm-hmm.
those are some things to think about. Right now, we haven't seen any significant issues that have happened with individuals in H1B status versus F1 at our ports of entry. And I hope it continues that way, but we will see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's okay. Okay, so Kimberly, right now we have gone through a lot of different perspectives about today's topic. With that, I would also like to know what are the legal rights do travelers have if they experience increased security checks or face some unexpected delays?
So when someone is applying for a visa stamp at a US consular post abroad,
Mm-hmm.
if their application is placed in administrative processing, it could be one, the officer needs a copy of a resume or information about their job duties. And so once the officer receives that documentation and or information, Typically, the administrative processing and the visa application are completed within 3 weeks, for the most part, is what we've typically seen. Um, there are situations where someone's application may be subjected to additional background testing, which means either the FBI background test or background security clearance by various other government agencies. In those situations, if a visa application case is in administrative processing, it could take as little as 3 weeks for the review, or it could take several months. So those are some things that could significantly delay a visa application process,
Mm-hmm.
especially under the executive order that calls for extreme vetting, right, of individuals coming into the US. When someone, once they get their visa stamp in their passport and they come into the US, now they're being reviewed and inspected by Customs and Border Protection. So if an individual has any history in their background of a status violation or a criminal issue, they definitely want to talk to an attorney to understand how that may impact
Mm-hmm.
their time with the CBP officer at the port of entry, right? What questions to expect, how to answer them, and how to be prepared for them. So that is one thing that individuals can do in advance if they have a prior immigration status violation or a prior criminal issue. Make sure to speak with experienced immigration counsel to know what their rights are at the port of entry, what they need to present, and how they should reply to various questions. So typically
Mm-hmm.
that's what we'll see with CBP. And as I mentioned, some individuals who have been entering under a parole document, specifically humanitarian parole, they may be placed in secondary inspection for additional questioning and for the officers to also confirm that their parole document is still valid.
All right. So, Kimberly, as you mentioned about the criminal backgrounds as well, I would like to know it from you. Like, what are the implications for travelers with past immigration violations or criminal records under the new orders? Yeah.
So for some individuals, with our new order, one second, I'm sorry, I have to cough. No, I'm okay. All right, sorry about that. With some of the new executive orders, but especially under the Lake and Riley Act, our understanding is it might be for criminal issues going forward, but it could be individuals who have had a prior arrest, and if they have not yet concluded that criminal process, that is something that they want to make sure before they're leaving the US that they're not going to have issues returning to the United States. So again, talking to an experienced immigration attorney and individuals who do run into unfortunate issues with our criminal system should in fact work with a criminal attorney and an immigration attorney who are
Mm-hmm.
experienced with the impact of criminal law on immigration status, so that a criminal attorney doesn't do something that would be advisable just from a criminal defense perspective, but could have a negative impact on someone's immigration status. So that's really important to have those two attorneys work together. We call it crimigration, to help individuals. So those are my recommendations and advice is to seek counsel before ever leaving the United States if you're already here in the US, so that you can ensure that you're prepared for a reentry to the US. And if there's any kind of possibility that you might not be admitted back to the United States, and that's something to really consider and talk through with attorneys.
That's right. I think Kimberly has said it very well. And friends, I would also like to know you that it's very important to seek legal advice and to know the legal rights as well. So why don't you go and contact attorney Kimberly Best Robidoux and consult with her, or let know about her what you guys are facing any problem or what queries you guys are having. So please go ahead and contact her on the given contact details that has been provided on the screen. So I think the contact details will be on the screen soon, but I would like to know, let her numbers know. And that is 619 4010. This is a contact number. And you can also email her in case if you're not able to contact her. Then you can also email her on the email ID that is krobidoux at wolfsdorf.com. And you can also visit her website that is www.wolfsdorf.com. So this is a contact detail, and with that, Kimberly, I can see a lot of viewers who have joined us. I can see Ram, Yash, Gauravi, and Rekha as well. So thank you so much, guys, for being here. And let's take first question of Ram. So Ram is saying that I'm planning to visit the US this summer on a tourist visa, but I have heard about new executive orders affecting travelers. Should I be worried about any sudden changes when I land at the airport? Oh, God. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Can you say that again, Sam? I want to make sure that I am understanding it correctly.
Sure, sure, sure. Let me read it out again.
I'm
So,
planning to visit the US,
this
right?
summer
That
on a tourist visa, but I have heard about new executive orders affecting travelers. So, should I be worried about any sudden changes when I land at the airport?
So that is a good question. We are anticipating some additional information or travel bans coming out in the next approximately 45 days or so that could impact travel to the US in the summer. One of the things that I recommend is just keeping on top of any visa changes and admission requirements into the United States because they could change at any given time. So what we're saying right now might not be what's in effect come June or July. So it's really important to just stay on top of any kind of changes that might come about between now and then. And that would be because of the executive orders that are asking for extreme vetting, for
Yeah.
additional security at our ports of entry. So those are some things to consider.
Absolutely. I think Ram is really concerned because he just asked that he's really worried when he arrived to the airport or when he landed to the airport, there might be some sudden changes. I think this is something that, every viewer and each, I would say everyone is really concerned that as soon as they land in the US, there might be some new executive order, there might be some new changes because that's what's happening in the US right now. So thank you
Right.
so much, Ram, for your question, and thank you so much, Kimberly, also for your answer. Let me take Yash comment, and Yash is saying that I am a green card holder, but I have been living outside the US for almost a year due to family reasons. Will the new executive order affect my re-entry, or could they question my intent to maintain permanent residency?
Yeah, that's a good question. And absolutely. So CBP officers have typically taken the viewpoint that if someone has been outside of the United States for 12 months or longer and they don't have an application for or an actual reentry permit, then they typically have abandoned their permanent resident status. That's the perception by CBP officers at the port of entry. If someone has been outside of the United States for more than 6 months, there can be a presumption of abandonment of permanent resident status. So it's really critical that an individual who is outside of the United States for more than 6 months apply for a reentry permit. And that reentry permit has to be applied for while physically present in the United States.
Mhm.
And one of the things that officers do ask is where's your residence? So if someone's main residence is now abroad, that is indicative of someone not maintaining their lawful permanent resident status in the United States. So that has been the rule and the law for many, many years. CBP will probably be tightening up their questions and possibly having more actions of individuals where they are saying you are not maintaining your lawful permanent resident status. And an individual in those circumstances, if the officer says we're revoking your green card, essentially, person should ask for immigration proceedings in order to prove if they are in fact, you know,
Mhm.
keeping their ties and maintaining their ties to the United States. So that's what's really, really important. If anybody has any possibility of being outside of the United States, once a permanent resident for more than 6 months, it is definitely recommended to apply for and obtain a reentry permit. And that reentry permit is, when the individual submits an application to the Immigration Service saying, hey, I'm a lawful permanent resident, I'm going abroad for a period of time, it's up to 2 years, because
Mhm.
of family reasons, medical reasons, or I have a temporary job, but I intend to return to the US and I don't want to abandon my permanent resident status. So in those circumstances, the reentry permit is that document that tells the CBP officer, hey, this person already told USCIS that they intend to be outside the United States, but don't want to abandon their permanent resident status.
That's right. Okay, so I think we already talked about Yash comment, and let's move ahead and let me also take Gauravi one. So, yeah, just I don't know why am I not able to show this. Yeah. So Gauravi is asking that as someone who is concerned about online privacy, I would like to know how will the expanded biometric data collection and social media monitoring under the new executive order affect international travelers like myself? What specific information will be collected and how will it be used? Yeah.
That is a good question. We don't know exactly what information will be collected or how it will be used. What you may see is happening here in the United States is with our Department of Government Efficiency essentially asking federal workers if they have loyalty to President Trump. We
Mhm.
could anticipate that individuals who have voiced opposition to President Trump or to his administration could
Mhm.
potentially have issues entering the US. That's speculation at this point in time, just kind of based on what we're seeing. It isn't, in fact, that we know of happening or definitely happening, but it's just something to consider. And again, that's based on what we're seeing with the federal workers. So, to the extent that people are posting in social media, it's probably best to be a little bit more, um, what's the word I want to use? Just be more careful about what's being posted.
Absolutely, because most of the time, we have been seeing fake news are also there, and most of the time, people are really getting anxious and concerned about when they got to know about those things. So it's very important to have a very credible source of your learnings as well, because that can mislead you as well. But I think Gauravi, thank you so much, and Kimberly has already answered your question. So in case if you still have any follow up question or any query, then please go ahead and post it in the comment section. And let me take Rekha's comment now. So Rekha is here and she is asking that as I navigate the recent changes to the H1B visa program, how can I ensure that my employer is complying with the new rules regarding specialty occupation, definitions, and wage requirements, particularly when dealing with complex or emerging fields like AI and cybersecurity?
So, with respect to that, employers are going to be working with their immigration counsel to ensure that they are reviewing the regulation as well as any new policies and orders in order to comply with the specialty occupation requirements and prevailing wage requirements. So, the requirement for the H1B program is that an employer pay the individual H1B worker the prevailing wage for the position based on the duties, the minimum requirements, and the location of employment, or the actual wage, whichever is higher, and the
Mhm.
actual wage is the wage that is, offered to an individual. So that's one thing that needs to be complied with, and that is, whether or not an employer is complying with the actual wage requirements is something that is reviewed by the officer when they are reviewing an H1B, when they're adjudicating an H1B petition. So, with respect to any, the changes for the definition of specialty occupation and newer positions, emerging positions, um, preparing the H-1B petition is something that would be done by the employer and by the immigration attorney. And as we, move forward, we're going to learn more and more because right now we don't know necessarily how the immigration service is going to treat some of these new emerging positions, how they're going to be, whether it is very strict or high level of scrutiny of H1B petitions for certain specialty occupations. So at this point in time, it's kind of we're waiting. We're not waiting, but as we file petitions, we are seeing what trends are coming out in order to be able to address those in petitions going forward.
That's right. Okay, so I think we all are waiting right now, like what's going to happen, and especially after this new administration, and that too, we have been seeing a lot of things that has been implemented by Trump, and that too, I think not more than 2 weeks, right? So, okay, I think Yash is saying that thanks a lot for that information. Thank you so much, Yash, for being here and participating in this session. Kimberly, we do have some Facebook questions as well, so I would like to know it from you. That can we go ahead and uh, ask these questions?
Sure.
That's great. Yeah, I think this is the first question that we got from Rohit. And he's asking, my spouse and child's H4 visa is expiring on 13th Feb. Their H4 extension got filed on 4th Feb. So are they good to continue in US while their H4 extension petition is in progress, or they will need to leave US by 13th Feb?
Yeah, as long as the principal beneficiary, so the H1B beneficiary, is maintaining valid H1B status, and
Mhm.
the H4 application for extension of stay has been submitted before the current I-94 document expires, then the individuals in H4 status can continue to remain in the US while the H4 application for extension is adjudicated by the Immigration Service. And again, that's also as long as the H4 spouse hasn't violated status by working without authorization or other immigration status violations. So the main rule is that as long as the request for the extension is filed before the current status expires, then an individual can remain in the US while that application is adjudicated by the government.
All right. Let's move ahead with our next question. And this is a question that we got from Sai. So he's asking that I'm requesting guidance on emergency traveling to India on F1 OPT as unpaid intern. And also, I made initial transfer from university to day one CPT college. Will it be a problem? What are the possible questions asked while returning back to the US?
Yeah, Sam, unfortunately, this one is really based on specific situation and would require, that legal advice by an attorney. So anything that I provide here, it's would be really generic and that would not help this individual. So I would really recommend seeking guidance from an immigration attorney just to ensure that any kind of travel will not have a negative impact on status in the US, and to be prepared for what documentation might be needed, because this is a slightly unique situation where someone was on an unpaid internship and is now day one CPT. So sorry about that, but it's just a really, really fact specific situation that really needs attorney guidance.
I think that's completely all right because we have an expert attorney here. So, Sai, please go ahead and you can contact Kimberley Best Robidoux attorney in 619 and you can also email her. Her email ID is krobidoux at wolfsdorf.com, and you can also visit her website that is www.wolfsdorf.com. So I think these were some of the questions, and we do have one more question also from a viewer. Okay, this is from, okay, it's a question that my H1B extension has been approved. Does my wife's EAD get the automatic extension for 540 days, or should I have to file for the EAD extension before the expiry? That is end of March, in order to get the 540 days extension. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it's actually it's a very confusing situation for H4 EADs. So H4 EADs are valid based on the validity period of the H1B beneficiary, as well as the I-94 document for the H4 spouse. So the H4 EAD card is not automatically extended for 540 days
Mhm.
directly. If the H4 spouse has an I-94 document that is valid beyond the expiration of their current EAD card, then they're
Mhm.
eligible for an automatic extension of that EAD card up to the expiration of their H4 I-94 document. So H4 EAD card holders do not get that automatic 540-day extension, but
Mhm.
rather the period of extension is based on the underlying H4 I-94 document, which could potentially be 540 days. But when an H4 extension is filed together with the H1B workers extension, um, they should be adjudicated at the same time, although now the USCIS is saying that they're eliminating that policy. So that's really something to be, to watch out for, is that the EAD card can only be automatically extended through the validity of the H4's I-94 document.
That's right. Okay, so I think we have already covered a lot of questions, and this is the last question that I think we should cover from the Facebook because I have some more questions to ask. So, Zafrin is asking that I was on F1 visa, finished the degree, and changed the status to B2 visa. Right now, I'm on B2. It is valid until March 20 this year. In the meantime, I had some health issues. I have doctor letters as well. I want to apply again for B2. Last time it was a change of status from F1 to B2. I submitted I-539. This time again, I'm applying for B2. So, what form should I fill out if anyone could let me know about the procedure? Yeah.
Yeah, so an extension of a B2 is also submitted on the form I-539. That's for the form I-539 is for a change of status or an extension of status
Mhm.
for categories such as the B2.
All right. So I think that's all. We have already covered a lot of Facebook questions, and now, Kimberly, I would like to come back to my questions that I have prepared for you. So I would like to know it from you. Like now, we are seeing a lot of immigration changes that's happening in this year. So do you think that these immigration changes may lead to some hostile relationship between the U.S. or the other country, or will the relations will remain the same? Do you think it's going to affect their relationship?
It's a good question, Sam, and I wish we all had a crystal ball to know what's going to happen, but it definitely could have an impact, right? If there are issues going on between the two governments, that could result in changes in visa reciprocity. It could result in visa processing times. So it definitely, the political environment could have an impact on the
Mhm.
visa application procedures and or processes or even eligibility. So that is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct because the H1B workers, if they are also being affected, they have been having a very delay in their process, then automatically we can understand the relation between the two countries will definitely be impacted a lot. And but we hope it doesn't happen, but let's see what's going to happen. Also,
Yeah.
Kimberly, I would like to know it from you that is there any specific visa category or any specific country that may face more challenges as compared to others?
Based on prior travel bans, more Muslim countries were impacted and had a negative impact with respect to their travel
Mhm.
into the United States and their visa application process. So until we have more information about what countries may be impacted by a travel ban, I don't know specifically, but based on prior experience, that might be what would be happening with a future executive order.
That's right. And what about the visa category? Any specific visa category that you would like to mention?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, typically the student visas like F, M, and J have not been negatively impacted in the past. What
Mhm.
was impacted in the past were visa categories such as H1B and L1. I mean, the Trump 1.0 did prohibit the issuance of
Mhm.
visa stamps for H1B holders, L1 holders, as well as for E holders. So
Mhm.
those could have a negative, could be negatively impacted. by any future policies or rules.
That's right. And I think we already understood that you said us that why H1Bs are affected and what people think about it. So it's very high time for the H1B applicants, and it's very important, friends, to stay updated and to know each and every changes that's happening, especially in the world of immigration in US. That's how you can save yourself, and that's how you can protect yourself. With that, I would also like to know one more question from you, Kimberly, and that is, which digital tools or mobile apps, are recommended from your side to stay updated on the latest travel and immigration policies? That could be anything like website, apps, or YouTube channel, anything that you prefer.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, um, people can subscribe to newsletters. Our firm, WR Immigration, does a newsletter that provides information to individuals about what's happening. We also have a lot of um, videos that we do online. But there's also a very reputable source is the American Immigration Council, and
Okay.
they are a nonprofit entity that follows what is happening with respect to immigration issues in the U.S. And they produce reports and fact sheets and guidance for the general public. So the American Immigration Council is a very reputable site that I would, recommend that people sign up for their newsletter, their updates, or check in on their website on a regular basis because they do provide accurate and informative information and guidance.
That's right. And I think that was really important question, Kimberly, because most of our people are just getting confused that where to take those credible news and where to, I mean, which website or which app should they rely on. So I'm sure that now they are getting these guidance from attorneys, so they will definitely look upon it and at least have a track, where to go ahead and which platforms they can look for the right information. So thank you so much, Kimberly. And it's almost an hour. We have covered a lot of questions. We got a lot of questions from viewers as well, and also different people as well. And here's another question. I think let's take this, and after that, we can move ahead with wrapping up. So, what should travelers with dual citizenship? Absolutely, this is another very important question. That what should travelers with dual citizenship be mindful of when traveling to the US under the latest travel restrictions?
So it's really important that, when individual enter the United States, if they have dual citizenship, that they enter using the citizenship for which they've been approved for a visa, right? That's really important that they do that. And it's also important just to stay on top of any additional or further travel restrictions for individuals that are from certain countries to see if our administration makes that applicable to those with dual citizenship. Typically, in the past, if someone has dual citizenship, they can use the citizenship that has not been impacted in order to enter the US. But again, we don't know how that might play out in the coming months based on potential guidance from the administration. So that's something to stay in tune and, as updates become available. But, for the typically individual with dual citizenship, they would be entering the US on the citizenship that has not been impacted or the citizenship through.
Absolutely. I think that's very well explained. And Kimberly, I think you have taken each and every questions very patiently. You explained everything in a very detailed manner. I honestly loved your answers, and always I really enjoy having shows with you because I get to learn a lot of things from you, and I'm sure our viewers are also learning a lot of things from you. So it's really good, and we are really honored to have you here. So thank you so much for being here. It was really a great show, a very informative show, and a very important show as well regarding considering today's discussion as well. So, any last message that you would like to say to our viewers before wrapping up?
Yeah, Sam, thank you for having me. It is always lovely just to speak with you and have this conversation. My recommendation is to stay update on what's happening with U.S. immigration issues because they can be changing, on a daily basis. So that's just one thing to just be aware of what's happening, especially if traveling to the United States, to make sure that you are protecting yourself and having the appropriate documentation to enter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for being here. And we are really waiting for your next time to come ahead and join our another show. So we'll definitely have a more show together, right?
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
All right. Thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you so much, our friends also who have joined us and participated in this session. And thank you so much for watching this session till the end. Make sure that you are updated, you are connected, and also stay vigilant because that's how you can save yourself and you can protect yourself if you are planning to travel to the US in this year. And also make sure that you can contact attorney Kimberly Best Robidoux, as that can be the best advice I could give you in today's episode. And the contact details are on the screen, so go ahead and contact her. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm also waiting for the next episode to have it with attorney Kimberly Best Robidoux. Stay connected, stay tuned. Goodbye for now, and take care, everyone.